Listener-supported St. Gabriel Catholic Radio AM 820 brings you Family Sanctuary, a show that inspires living the gospel message in word and deed within our families. And now, Family Sanctuary with host Peggy Hartshorn.
Welcome to the Family Sanctuary, focusing on life-giving relationships and the family. I'm your host, Peggy Hartshorn, chairman of the board of Heartbeat International that advances life-affirming pregnancy help around the world. And today we have a very special program and a very special guest, a dear friend of mine who's going to be sharing with us today. And the title of our program is Miraculous Jesus in the Eucharist. Miraculous Jesus in the Eucharist. And what a beautiful thing to think about. Jesus, you not only are the Lord of the universe, but you are also right here in the Blessed Sacrament, in our churches every day. Sometimes we have the opportunity to receive you in the Holy Eucharist, adore you in the Blessed Sacrament, and how miraculous is that, that the Lord of the universe is right here and so accessible to us.
And so miraculous for our families.
And so miraculous for our families, right, Mary? Our guest today is going to be sharing her personal journey and how God has now given her a special devotion to the Blessed Sacrament that's even leading her to write a book. We'll talk about that in a minute. But our guest today is a dear friend of mine, Mary Gardner. You've heard a program with Mary and Jeff in the past, one on the Rosary, one on their relationship. Having been married now 48 years, congratulations. You still look really young to me.
I'll take it.
I've known you since you and Jeff were without children, actually.
Right.
In the pro-life movement, we were working together. And now you have birthed 5 beautiful children. You have now 6 grandchildren, including 3 by adoption, which is beautiful. And of course, one of your claims to fame, the mother of Father Tom Gardner here in the Diocese of Columbus. So Mary, as I mentioned, is writing a book about not only her personal journey in having a new and a very special understanding and devotion to Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, but also sharing other stories. The title of your book, I believe you said, Mary, is Jesus in the Eucharist, Grace, Healing, and Transformation Hidden in Plain Sight.
Yes, that's the best I could come up with for now. I'm open to suggestions.
Well, we've entitled the program Miraculous Jesus in the Eucharist, so there's a shorter title.
There you go.
But it's wonderful that your own journey, you're feeling you need to share that journey, not only on the program, but also in this book that you're writing. And it makes me think how appropriate, because just recently our whole church here in the United States particularly has celebrated the year of the Eucharist. In 2024, we had the National Eucharistic Congress. Some of the beautiful things associated with that were just amazing to me. The processions of the Eucharist from all 4 corners of this country, north, south, east, and west. It seems that there's an awakening all over.
It's true.
to the beauty and the profound importance of Jesus in the Eucharist. So how did your journey on this start, Mary? It didn't start last year.
No.
With the year of the Eucharist. It goes back. Share a little bit about your journey.
Absolutely. I've been so looking forward to sharing more of my Eucharistic journey on your program. And I know we've touched on it a little bit in an interview you mentioned that Jeff and I did together on your show. And we talked about secrets of a long-lasting marriage. And of course, daily Eucharist is definitely one of the biggest secrets. So my Eucharistic journey really began at this point about 15 years ago. And I have shared before about working at that time for Bethesda Healing Ministry, which, as you know, their mission is an outreach to men and women and their families wounded by abortion. And the lay leadership of that ministry were some of the holiest people I had ever encountered at that time. And just rubbing shoulders with them, overhearing bits of their conversation, they would often talk about the gospel or the homily at that morning's daily mass. And it just began to strike me how daily Mass seemed like a commonplace, just integral part of their lives, like breakfast in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could relate to that, having worked in the pro-life movement, as you know, for, gosh, I guess about 50 years.
Yeah, decades and decades.
Right. Some of the people that do, they just radiate a holiness. And you're right, that it just comes into the conversation, what the reading was at daily Mass that morning and how that affected them. But before meeting these wonderful people, Mary, you had not really thought much about daily Mass, right?
No, it was never on my radar, except for, the occasional Holy Day of Obligation, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe Holy Thursday or Good Friday during Holy Week. It just never occurred to me to want to do more than that or to feel that I even needed more than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine you're probably not unusual in that,
Right.
in that regard. Most of the people who are, and sometimes now packing our churches, I love to see that
Me too.
in our churches today,
Mm-hmm.
packing the Sunday Mass for a variety of reasons. You're
Mm-hmm.
right. Probably don't even think about trying to work daily Mass into their schedules.
Right.
Yeah.
People are busy.
Right.
So anyway, being around and rubbing shoulders with these folks, I started feeling inspired myself. And I decided early in 2010 to begin attending daily Mass. It started 2 or 3 times a week as a Lenten observance.
That reminds me when I was a little child, and that's my actual memory of why I started going to daily Mass. Because as a school child, during Lent, the teachers allowed us in a Catholic school. The teachers allowed us to be a little bit late for the first class if we were going to go to daily Mass during Lent. And they actually had donuts and milk in the cafeteria. It was 5 cents for one donut, 2 cents for white milk, 3 cents for chocolate milk.
Those were the days.
That was a treat. And so many of the children went to daily Mass during Lent.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my first taste of daily Mass. But go ahead with your story. So during
Sure.
Lent, you decided to try to go to Mass a couple of times a week.
I did. And it was a big adjustment to my morning routine, foregoing breakfast till after Mass, but it felt like a worthy sacrifice for Lent. Definitely a step up from giving up chocolate, right? So I patted myself on the back for doing Jesus a big favor. And I felt virtuous for going to church when I didn't have to.
Yeah, you were doing something for Jesus.
Exactly. And it really never occurred to me that it might actually be Jesus doing all the favors.
So he had something in store for you that you didn't even anticipate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And doesn't he always?
Mm-hmm.
So actually what happened was so subtle that it took a while for me to notice. I'd say it was about 2 months or so into my daily Mass routine that I began to feel different. And the best way I can describe it is I became less argumentative and less my way or the highway, more willing to listen to others. My husband, Jeff, would say I became nicer to live with.
Wow.
And it was, and it continues to be gradual and incremental. And, what I came to understand is that by receiving Jesus in that tiny host each day, I was also receiving a tiny dose of his character.
Wow. Yes. If we really think of the actual meaning of what we are doing when we receive communion, we are receiving the body and blood, soul and divinity of Jesus Christ right in our own bodies. And that has to make a profound difference.
Oh, yeah.
It has to make a profound difference. So, yes, you didn't see that coming, but wow, that's beautiful, Mary. Yeah.
So, what it was like feeling this interior transformation, for me, it was just so humbling, especially, because my eyes were being opened to recognizing my own faults and character flaws that Jesus was just slowly working on in my life. And I thought, wow, I mean, I'm not that special. If he's doing this for me, what must he be doing for the other folks I see at daily Mass? And why don't more people know about this? And why don't our pastors preach more about this on Sundays? I mean, I feel like the church's Sunday obligation requirement is like a minimum survival dose of Jesus in the Eucharist. And why would you want to just survive on a little of him if you could thrive on more of him? So, over the last years since then, I've spoken to a few priests about my thoughts on this, including my son, the father.
Father Tom.
Right? I mean, it feels like Jesus in the Eucharist is this secret treasure that our Catholic Church has. And it's hiding in plain sight, and most people don't even recognize the magnitude of it.
Right. Absolutely. And it's interesting, going back to the beginning of your story, that you noticed a difference in the people you were working with there at Bethesda. The people who were going to daily Mass, you saw it. You noticed it. Yeah. You could hear and see Jesus in them. And of course, that's one of the effects, of a closeness to Jesus. Yeah. How can we pour out love on those around us if we're not filled with love? And love, God is love. So receiving Jesus on a daily basis, wow. You're right. We need to think more about that tremendous opportunity we have. And I do think priests are beginning to talk more about this. I hear it more on Catholic radio too, and I'm glad to be able to share your story to help people see that difference. Yeah.
I agree with you. The secret is starting to get out. And while I'm at it, I do want to share another experience with you.
Sure.
From that first year of my Eucharistic journey.
Please, go ahead.
So it was one weekday morning, several months into my daily Mass attendance. I had this kind of epiphany during the walk up to receive communion. So for the first time ever, it occurred to me that every day, all over the world, thousands of times a day, Jesus comes and makes himself present to us in the Holy Eucharist at Mass.
Absolutely.
Imagine for a moment the enormous risk he takes. We come forward in such varied states of mind, reverent, indifferent, tired, angry, distracted, unbelieving, weighted down by our private sin. I know because I have been all of those. And Jesus puts himself out there for us all. So I was just overwhelmed by that realization, that revelation. I mean, imagine someone like the President of the United States kneeling down to shine your shoes. And yet, how infinitely more amazing that the King of the universe bends so low every day to become our tiny communion wafers.
Right. I think we realize that, we know that, we understand that as part of our faith. Jesus coming as a helpless baby, being dependent on all those around him, like every human baby, being born in such humble circumstances, being placed in a manger where cattle normally eat from that manger. I mean, we know that as part of our faith, but you're right. This is kind of still hidden right in front of us when it comes to Jesus in the Holy Eucharist. Yeah, absolutely. In those tiny communion wafers, as you mentioned. So that's beautiful and life-changing.
Yeah, it really has been. I mean, for Jeff and I, sharing daily Eucharist in common has brought us incredibly closer as a couple.
Before you share that, let me just remind everybody who our guest is. I've been remiss in doing that. If you missed the very beginning of the program, our guest today is Mary Gardner, who has been a dear friend of mine and my husband Mike and her husband Jeff for many, many years. And Mary is sharing her journey of realizing what we've given as the title of her program, Miraculous Jesus in the Eucharist. This was a journey that she shared began, I think you said about 2010. Isn't that correct? And how that awakening has just transformed her life. It's been transformational. And we have actually had Jeff and his wife, Mary, on our program in the past, sharing about the secret of their lasting and beautiful marriage. And they touched on this devotion to the Holy Eucharist and daily Mass in that program. Mary's building it out here for us. So So Mary, as you were talking about this personal transformation of yourself, and you're realizing your faults. You're realizing how you need to change your daily behaviors and how that's affected your family and your marriage. So share a little more about that. How not only you, but your relationship with Jeff and your family has been transformed.
I would say that praying together for our children and grandchildren and asking Our Lady to hold them close has been incredible for us. And it's as a result of our shared devotion to Jesus in the Eucharist.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that we both do is when we receive communion, both of us do this in our after communion prayers. We both ask Jesus to share our communion graces with our whole family. And that's given us such a grace and such a peace.
Share your communion graces with your whole family.
Yes.
And does that need to be a talk on the Blessed Sacrament every now and then?
Maybe so.
I see by your smile. Maybe so. All right. But how does that? I think what you're saying here is that, like the holiness that you perceived and the love coming from the people that you were working with there at Bethesda, that really inspired you to start going to daily Mass.
Mm-hmm.
You're really seeing that inspiration. I mean, that is coming out almost naturally with you and Jeff.
Yeah.
And in your interaction with your children and grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So besides your own story, Mary, now you're inspired to tell other people's stories. So let's get back a little bit to this book you're working on.
Right.
Tell me about it. How did it get started and how's it coming?
Well, if I'm honest, I have to admit it took me a long time to get it started because I was a little scared. I've never written a book before, and it was hard to think of myself as an author. It was kind of overwhelming even figuring out how to begin. But I just couldn't stop thinking about all the stories that must be out there of other people's Eucharistic journeys, and that all their stories are worth sharing, especially for those who don't know what they're missing because they've never found the time to experience Jesus in daily Mass or adoration. So, it's time to let the secret out and spread the word.
That's great. That's beautiful. I love your enthusiasm, and I know that Jesus does too.
I hope so. He's been so patient with all my fears and delays.
Yeah. And I know myself, having felt a call in the past and even now to write and share my experiences and so forth, that the hardest part is just starting.
Yes.
Absolutely. So did you start with your own chapter?
I did. I've completed my own, and I'd love to share a little bit about some of the other people's stories that I've collected. So far, I'm excited to say I have 10 chapters written, and I just interviewed someone last week. I haven't yet started transcribing hers, but it's people of all walks of life, really. Men and women, all ages. I've interviewed a couple of feisty ladies living strong in their 80s.
Wow.
A seminarian in his 20s, and everything in between. All walks of life, married, divorced, priests, single parents. And the common thread in all their stories is the miraculous presence of Jesus.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
How are you finding these people? Well, of course, when God calls you, he also lays out the path for you, doesn't he? I bet he's put some of these people just right in your path.
Well, yes. And I'm finding the writing of it to be hard work, but immensely satisfying every time I complete a story, and I feel like I've done that person justice.
Wow.
And I especially love Braley's story. She was raised Protestant, married a Catholic, and one of the first reasons she was drawn to becoming Catholic is that whenever she was in a Catholic sanctuary, she felt a presence that she absolutely knew was missing in her Protestant church.
That's amazing.
I know she couldn't identify what or who it was, but she knew it was real.
Mm-hmm. But did she, and it was just a sense that she had,
Yes.
kind of an inspiration as she was praying in the church or coming in simply to look at the church, simply make a visit.
Well, she was married to a Catholic, and so they split their time between both their churches.
And she had come with her husband.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and so sometimes she would even go back and visit the Catholic Church on her own. just to be in that presence.
Mm-hmm. I know sometimes, Mary, I've in my pro-life travels, of course, sometimes even if I'm not staying or being housed with a Catholic couple or a Catholic family, sometimes when I go to Mass there with them, that they want to come. I offer, would you like to come?
Mm-hmm.
And it's very common to hear them say things like, wow, I was surprised by the reverence that I felt in that church,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
So it is amazing. Jesus' presence for those who are open in their hearts is powerful. Just coming in and making a visit in our church or coming with someone else, that's powerful.
So another one that whose story I've told is Sean, and he's a seminarian that I met through our son, the Father.
Mm-hmm.
And he was raised an atheist, and then he started dating a Catholic girl, and she got him to attend a weekend retreat. And at that retreat, a single encounter with Jesus in Eucharistic adoration absolutely changed his life. It was like infused knowledge, as he described it to me. It was like infused knowledge.
Wow.
Came.
That's
into
amazing.
him. Oh, yeah.
And his again, simply inviting someone to come with you to a retreat, to a to Mass, to adoration. That would be very special.
Oh, yeah.
Inviting someone who doesn't have an understanding of the Holy Eucharist, and yet simply being there. I think you mentioned then his girlfriend invited him.
Yes.
And now he's a seminarian.
Yeah. Yeah.
How does his girlfriend feel about that?
She is so happy for him.
That's wonderful. And for the church, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So another one of my favorites is Carol, who also was raised by non-believers, but she decided at the age of 9 that she loved everything about the Catholic Church. And she wandered into a Catholic church one time and said to herself, something in there is God.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Something in there is God.
Yeah.
Reminds me of another story, and I don't remember the actual specifics, but it was a story I also read about someone coming to this understanding even as a child. She was in a Protestant family that lived in a Catholic neighborhood. I believe it was in Boston. And many of the children were walking by her house, and when she was heading to her school, they were going to their Catholic school, and sometimes they were going to Mass, and she observed that. She really had a longing for that, you know, and as a little child, she observed something in her friends that she wanted to be able to experience herself. And so she would kind of sneak into the Catholic Church every once in a while, became a very strong Catholic. But the amazing what you're saying about the presence of the Eucharist is actually palpable.
Yes.
And God, I believe, softens the heart of people to be able to perceive that, you know.
Yeah.
So other stories. What are some of the other stories, Mary?
Well, some of my contributors have experienced visions. Others have received healing through the Eucharist. You know, and it just reminds us that Jesus' miracles are all different and all profound in their own ways. And you were asking earlier that how did I find the people to interview?
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I did start with people I know, and I've others through word of mouth. But I'm sort of approaching the end of the people on my list, which is where this beautiful Catholic radio program comes in, because I'm hoping that some of the listeners may want to share their stories to help inspire other people.
I'm sure there are people listening who have a story. So how can they connect with you, Mary? That's a good idea.
I was hoping you'd ask. I have set up a new email account exclusively for being in contact with people that want to be part of my book. The address is eucharistic.journeys@gmail.com.
eucharistic.journeys@gmail.com. I'm surprised. That's a beautiful, well, of course, it's not a website. It's an email, a special email for this purpose.
Account.
But what a great and easy to remember, I hope, eucharistic.journeys@gmail.com. So if you're listening in and God is moving in your heart, please, you want to receive an email, right?
Yeah, send me an email and let's talk. So in my stories, I'm only using people's first names. We want to protect everyone's privacy and, have them share what they feel comfortable sharing. It's all to give glory to Jesus in the Eucharist.
Absolutely. Do you have an idea of how many stories you could actually include?
Another great question, Peggy. I have thought all along I should have at least 20 in order for the manuscript to be a respectable size. But if this project takes off, and I hope it does, I feel it will, I can imagine continuing to collect stories and putting out multiple volumes. We'll just have to wait and see how the Lord leads.
You know what I'm thinking, Mary? It may lead to a blog.
Or that.
You can have continuous stories.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
God may be really giving you a focus here and I know that this is going to have an impact on your children and your grandchildren as well. And everyone whose stories you've mentioned, how this is such a powerful opportunity, really, to just by who you are, be sharing the Lord. I was thinking about some of the goals for the Eucharistic Year of the Eucharist last year, too. We mentioned that one of their goals was, the goals of the bishops in starting this, was ever more deep understanding and devotion to the Eucharist, but also to be a light of Christ in the world.
Amen.
To be a light of Christ in the world. Well, Mary, thank you so much for being our guest today on the Family Sanctuary.
Very welcome.
Sharing your journey and what God is doing with you and your family as you have continued to develop this real connection with Jesus hidden there in plain sight. So thank you all for listening to the Family Sanctuary on St. Gabriel Catholic Radio. I'm your host, Peggy Hartshorn. And to find this program again and other programs from the Family Sanctuary, go to stgabriel.com, choose podcasts, and then the Family Sanctuary. Family Sanctuary is broadcast at 4 o'clock on Saturdays and 2 o'clock on Sundays right here on St. Gabriel Catholic Radio. So join us again to strengthen our families and make them sanctuaries of life as God intends.
Family Sanctuary is a production of listener-supported St. Gabriel Catholic Radio, AM 820. Archives of Family Sanctuary with Peggy Hartshorn are available at stgabrielradio.com.